Hi Ardmore, this is Pastor Carrie and Pastor Michael Rogers with The Jar, and we have met again tonight at 4 o'clock, and we just wanted to kind of share what we've learned. First of all, we want to say thank you for the barbecue last weekend. We served about 90 people, between 85 and 90, thanks to Sophie's Barbecue, and we just want to give a shout out to her. Thank you, Sophie, for that amazing food. For the Ardmore Fire Department for bringing out the trucks, or a truck, I should say, and passing out candy. And then, of course, we want to say thank you to where we're meeting every Sunday at 4 right now through the summer, which is the HFB Community, Wilson Community Center here in Ardmore. And so we're just grateful that they let us use the space, and thank you so much. The other thing is, if you like what you see on this video and you want to keep on, like and follow us on Facebook, and then share us with your friends and family here in Ardmore, or surrounding areas. We want to get to know you better, and we want to learn from you just as much as you learn from us. The other thing is, we want to continue to invite you every Sunday at 4 o'clock right here at the community center. As you can tell, it doesn't matter what you wear.
That's right.
Be casual, wear shorts, t-shirt, we don't care. Just
We
come as
really,
you are.
it's really more about having the conversation and learning from each other, and so it's pretty low key.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally low-key tonight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just wear what you want, come out, bring a friend. I know it's hard sometimes to go someplace new and you don't know people and you don't know what's going on and what they're all about. So bring a friend, bring a family member. We don't care.
Yep.
Just bring you. We'd love to meet you. And then finally, before we get into the passage of John chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, just want to remind our not yet believers that there is an app, a free app on your phone called YouVersion. You can download that app and follow along with us.
That's YouYOU, YouVersion, and the YouVersion app has all different kinds of Bible translations. And so what that means is all of them are trying to get down to the original and help you to understand what it means. Some of them are easier to read than others. And so you can take a look at it and kind of graduate as you go, as you start learning and understanding more, graduate into some of the other kinds of versions of things so you can see what they have to say.
Absolutely. And one more thing about the barbecue last weekend too. I loved the people that we got to meet last week.
Oh, yeah. If
Thank
you were
you.
there, thank you so much
Thanks
for showing up.
coming.
Yeah.
And even if you just came to get food but didn't necessarily come inside, we just are so humbled and so honored that we got to serve you all by giving you a free meal. And if you want to know more about our mission here at The Jar, which is basically to be filled so that we can be emptied to others, we would love to see you and meet you face to face. So, all right, so we are still in John because we're learning all about Jesus. And I don't know about you, but I can never learn enough about him. It just always amazes me what he teaches us. And so this passage in particular is really important for us here at The Jar because there are jars involved in this story.
Right.
And it also kind of encapsulates, or kind of, is that the right word? Encapsulates. He's my one that helps me with all that. Getting the right words, my academic over here. Helps me with the words that I'm trying to say, but it really kind of encompasses like who we are as The Jar.
Yeah.
So John chapter 2, it's in the New Testament, verses 1 through 12. And I'm going to be reading from the ESV version. So starting with verse 1, it says, "On the third day there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, 'They have no wine.' And Jesus said to her, 'Dear woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come.' His mother said to the servants, 'Do whatever he tells you.'" So there were two things that I noticed in that part,
Okay.
and of course you could jump in.
Sure.
But the first of all, it's important to understand Jewish culture. When they did weddings, they didn't just do like a day.
Like a couple hours
Or-
of a ceremony and then a couple of,
Yeah.
maybe a night of
They
reception.
didn't do it the American way.
No.
Okay, they had.
It was much more fun.
Yeah, they had like an entire week of celebration.
Yes.
And if you got invited to a Jewish wedding, it was rude to say no.
Right.
And so Jesus and his disciples, which are pretty much his family at this point, right, have been invited to this wedding, and so they show up. And so to run out of wine at a wedding is extremely embarrassing for a Jewish family. Like, that breaks the laws of all hospitality.
And it says something too about their socioeconomic, like
Right.
if they can't afford to have wine for the whole week, that says
Right.
something about their family.
Right. So they run out and they start to panic, right? And so that's when Mary, Jesus' mother, comes to and says, "You got to help us." The second thing is I wanted to point out was...
Wait, she doesn't say, "Hey, Jesus, we've got trouble." She just comes up and says, "They have no wine."
Yeah.
That's mom's shorthand.
That's pretty much, which is how I would talk to my oldest.
That's right.
Probably.
They have
we
no
have
wine.
we have no wine. We're out. We're in trouble. And so I find it interesting that he says, "We don't have anyone." And Jesus says to her, "Dear woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." So do you want to talk about that, just what he meant by that when he said that? And then I'll talk about
Sure.
the part where in verse 5 he says to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you."
Sure. We actually had a conversation about this because if you just read this off the top, and the ESV doesn't say "dear woman," it just says
Yeah,
"woman."
I put that
and
in
so you could, and it's right
Yeah.
to do so. You could take a look at that, and Mary comes up and says they have no wine, and you could feel a little family tit for tat here. Woman, what's that got to do with me? But actually, that word, one of the ways to translate that in the English is "my lady." It was meant to be, it's actually a tone of respect, not a tone of disrespect. So today, I could not go up to my wife and say, "Woman, what?"
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, if you knew I was teasing. But what Jesus is actually doing is, as a tone of respect, "My lady, woman, what does that have to do with me? It's not my time yet. You understand. I understand you're asking me to do something that I have not heard from my Father I'm prepared to do. I am not ready yet to reveal myself to anyone." And it's interesting how she responds.
Yeah. So in verse 5 it says, "His mother said to the servants, 'Do whatever he tells you.'" And so the thing that I noted on that was just, Mary had no idea what Jesus was going to do. She just knew that she could trust him. And she also knew that he was more than just a human. He was more than just a man. He was divine. So whatever he decides to do there, it's going to work out.
Right.
And so the level of trust that she has in her son in that moment, I think is something that Mary can teach us, which is when we come to Jesus or we come to God and we say, "We need this," or "We are short on this," or "God help us," sometimes we short-sight him. Sometimes we don't look beyond what we think how he should answer, right? And so we have to be willing to trust him when we ask him to answer in the way that is best for us as his kids, which is especially important on Father's Day because today's Father's
that's
Day, right? And a father is always going to try to bless his children and give them what he feels they need the most.
For those of you who aren't as familiar with the Bible, are some of our not yets, and some of our believers who haven't really studied, it's more than likely that Joseph has already passed away. Jesus' father has probably already passed
Right.
away here. And so maybe you've experienced that in your family where the father figure has passed away or has gone, and the mother and the son suddenly have a different kind of bond.
Yes.
And so I see this playing here too. We have to remember Jesus was just as human as he was divine. And so there's a special bond between him and his mother.
Yeah.
And I love
she
that.
She was a single mama in that moment.
Right. And
she was a single mama.
just like a single mama, he never actually says, "Okay, I'll do it." She just turns to everybody else and says, "Do whatever he says."
Exactly. So let's go on down to verse 6. It says, now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification. So the other part of Jewish culture that you should understand is that from the very time that they're little, they're taught by their teachers and their leaders that they are to wash their hands before they eat. So they're eating and feasting throughout this entire week of the wedding. And so to have huge 30-gallon, we're probably talking about 20 to 30 gallons, these huge jars.
Think of your big round trash cans that you
Right,
use out in the backyard.
Cans.
Yeah,
That's
think
how
of those
big the jars
30-gallon
are.
trash cans. That's how big
Right,
these are.
these big Jewish jars,
Yeah.
clay jars. And so they had that much water because, one, for, washing whatever dishes and things that they did and for cooking, but also primarily for the ritual of washing their hands prior to eating or drinking. So there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons, is what verse 6 says. And Jesus said to the servants in verse 7, fill the jars with water. And they filled them up to the brim. They didn't fill them up halfway. They filled them up all the way.
Right.
And he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine is served. But you have kept the good wine until now.
Now that's interesting. Something to keep in mind. Just think of like an event planner, someone who is in charge of the whole thing. So the master of the feast is that person.
Right.
Their reputation is on the line. And so I love the way that they present that in The Chosen. If you haven't watched any of the episodes of The Chosen,
It's so good, yeah.
they actually
Yeah.
decide to make Doubting Thomas the master of the feast in this story. That's probably not what happened. It's just a way to kind of condense and kind of to bring out some of the character of Thomas. But the great thing is that as they're running out of wine, the master of the feast is beginning to freak out. Like it's not just bad on the family. He may not be asked to help with another feast if he allows this to happen. And so this is kind of saving his bacon too. And so when he's like, oh good, somebody found wine. He's probably thinking, I don't care how cheap it is, everybody's half drunk anyway. Like let's just go ahead and serve what's there. And then he gets a taste of it. And he finds out that whatever Jesus touches is not just good, it's the best.
Right. And that was the point that I was going to make, is that sometimes, going back to the first thing I talked about, sometimes our expectations are that God is kind of dull and kind of boring, right? We ask him for
Right.
something and he,
Right.
okay, whatever. But Jesus didn't just make any wine out of that water. He made the best wine. And so the same can be said about him. Life in him is better than life on our own, right? We can do this world or this life on our own, but why? When we can have someone who, touched my nose, when we can have someone who, maybe that was the Spirit telling me I was on point.
You know, at our last church, I always had
Always been
flies
on point.
around me whenever I would preach. It's just the flies that followed
He's
us from
saying it's
Indiana.
on point. That we can live this life in this world without him. And we can do that, but with him, our life is so much better, and we get the best of the best. So then going on into chapter 11, then it says, this is the first of his signs, or basically miracles, right? So this is the very first miracle that we see Jesus perform. So this is the first of his signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. And when it says his disciples believed in him, I think the one thing that I noted was when it says believed in him, it kind of showed or set up what his ministry was going to be all about, which is helping others, speaking with authority, right? And being in personal touch with others. It's all about, he was about the people. He wanted, it was about his mom. It was about the people at the feast. It was about his family of disciples. It was, he was not necessarily ready to do his first miracle yet. He says that earlier in the chapter, but he does it, and when he does it, he gives 100 and above 100%.
I love it because
So-
we get the sense, because Jesus, what we hear is that Jesus was sinless. And so we have this idea that everything he did was just absolutely perfect. Like he always knew everything that was coming and knew everything that was going on. But this just shows in his humanity, he allowed the Father to be the one to help him know when to do things and what to do. And so his heavenly Father had not said, it's time to do this. But Mom said, and that's okay. So he's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And really it was in honor of her to some extent. But just imagine how God used this, the Father used this. There weren't very many followers at this point. John wasn't so much interested in the chronology, like when things happened. He was more interested in us knowing who God is, who Jesus is.
Right.
And so this is shown here. It's very possible that this is really very early in the ministry where there's just a few followers. We know what that feels like. You're doing a church plant. You just never know. And it's mostly his family, maybe a couple of others,
Right.
and they are watching, but
Right.
they see this and they think, man, this is the stuff. All of a sudden, the God that is so extraordinary is connected to real life. And all of a sudden they go, wait a minute, there's more to this than we thought.
That's
and so
right.
it says, God allowed Jesus to do this. The Father allowed Jesus to do this for what's at the end of verse 11. It manifested his glory and his disciples believed in him.
Right.
And that gave him a chance to move forward.
Right. And then in verse 12 it says, after this he went down to Capernaum with his mother and his brothers. And I just wanted to point out that the Greek word there for brothers means brothers and sisters, right? And his disciples, in other words, his family. And they stayed there for a few days. So to me, it's like when we gather together, part of the reason that we're stressing so much for you guys to come is because there's something special about getting together with a group of people and praying together and asking God for miracles and for signs and asking him to be a part of what you're doing. It just bonds you and it makes you family.
And knowing that it can be a part of real life.
Right.
It's not
Right.
just,
Real life.
pray for the big things,
Yeah.
world peace and, like healing cancer. But it's also, hey, there's not enough wine in the, like it can be just the simplest things and God is right there with us.
I need $10 to fill up my gas tank.
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
Right?
That's
And
right.
then the $10
That's right.
shows up at just the right time. Or maybe the person that you're hanging out with at the gathering feels led to give you that $10 at just the right time. Those are the kinds of things that we've seen happen.
We've seen it, yeah.
And we know that it can happen today. So for our not yets, I guess my big thing is being a good person and doing all of the right things. It's noble and you can create a good life, but believing and allowing Jesus to be intertwined in your real life,
Right.
it makes it so much more. And the example that I thought of, and I don't know if this is a good one or not, but
Go for it, girl.
it came to me was, it's like going to your favorite baseball team's game, right, with
Gotcha.
Jesus. So you
So
could
that's,
just,
it's the Cubs, right?
well, for you, it's
For me. For me.
So, you could go to a game all by yourself. You could buy a ticket and just show up, and it just be a normal game, right? And it could even be a good game, and they could even win. But when you add Jesus to that, and you take him with you, now you get the best seats in the stadium. All the food is free. You get the perfect cold beer, because there ain't nothing like a perfect cold beer in a baseball
hot day in a
game.
baseball game, sure.
You get a shaded area where when you need it, where you're sitting. It's perfect weather. There's plenty of room for your legs. I'm tall,
That would be something that was
so
be
that was
important
important for me.
I don't need as
You're
much
not
room.
crammed, right? You've got all the room for your legs.
Right.
Your favorite players hit all the home runs every time they step up to the plate. And you have somebody to share it with. You're not sitting there all by yourself, right? You've got
right.
somebody to share it with and witness it with. And someone to make sure, there's somebody there to make sure that all of these things happen so that you don't just go to a ball game, you have an experience. And I think that's the difference. Like people say, what difference does it make if I include Jesus into my life? I'm a good person. I do things. I have a good life. And I guess what I would say to you is, yeah, you can have that good ball game where you win at life. But if you want a ball game that's memorable every time, that is so much more, take Jesus along with you in that ball game of life. And that's the example that I felt like God gave me this week.
That's good. For the already believers, just remember, Jesus is playing the long game with you. He is, if you have already experienced this and you are already beginning to see that life with Jesus, connecting real life to this Jesus that loves us so much, makes it so much sweeter, and there's so many things that it suddenly makes better. That's great, but just recognize he's playing the long game with you. His intention isn't just to give you all the best things. So just recognize that what he wants for you is to understand how you were made, why you were made, what purpose you have, and then add that into what his purpose is. And the two of you together, working together to bring about life in others. That's why this is so important to us, because it's about our jars being filled. We believe God is going to fill our jars.
All the way to the brim.
All the way to the brim, just like Jesus
Not
asked them to
halfway.
do. Not halfway, all the way.
All the way to the brim.
But when he fills us to the brim, it's not like we can just sit there and go, oh, good, I'm done, I'm filled. It's time now to spill that out into the jars around you, the people around you.
People at your wedding.
So those of you who are already, here's the great thing is, Jesus asks you to be an ambassador for him. So you're the one that takes them to the game. You're the one that helps them. It may be that you're the reason that they get the free food. You maybe bought the food. Maybe you were the one who stood in line to get the cold beer. Maybe you're the one who helped to make a little extra room for their legs. That, as an already believer, you're the one God is using to bring that kind of experience into someone else's life. And let me tell you, I'm just telling you from experience, there is a deeper joy that comes out of that than just being the one that gets doted on. Like it's fun to be that person, but when you get to love on somebody like that, what you find is it fills you up even more. And the more he fills you, the more you can empty. Then he keeps filling you and you keep emptying. And so we want to challenge you, as those of you who are already believers, be the one to make the game that special for someone else this week.
And let him fill you to the brim with the best wine.
Yes.
He's not going to fill you with just water. He's going to fill you with the best wine so that then you can become all that you're supposed to be. And like I said before, don't just live a good life, live an excellent life. And our mission is, our goal and our mission at the jar is to include God in our real life, right? Connecting real life to our extraordinary God. And that's our goal and our mission. And so, like I said, this story just kind of fully encompasses exactly where we got the name and got our logo and our symbol that you've been seeing everywhere. So, all right. Well, shoot us a message if you have any prayers or questions about today's
leave
lesson.
Comments on the video.
Today's gathering, I should say, what we talked about. And hopefully we'll see you guys next Sunday at 4 p.m. right here at HFV Wilson Community Center.
Right. 625 Main Street if you're from outside of Ardmore.
Yep. Hope to see you.
Right.
Have a great week.